Well, well, this is my personal account. I can do this.
Well, good morning. I'll call the meeting to order. It's Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. It's about 8:02 a.m. And this is SELCO Commission meeting, so call the meeting to order, and we're off and running. Review and consider approval of December 2023 bill schedules and warrants. Do we have any comments, corrections?
I do have a comment. So I saw that we got a new pickup truck. Is that electric?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I couldn't believe the price. It was only $40,000, and come to find out, we actually got it. That's prior to all the increases that went into effect for electric vehicles. So we actually got a good deal on that thing. So, okay. Any other comments or corrections or anything on the warrant? If not, do we have a motion to accept? And there was nothing that specifically from your company that I saw.
No.
Okay.
So moved.
Was that?
Second.
Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Secondly, or the next item is meeting minutes of December 19th, 2023. Any comments or corrections?
No comments?
If we have no comments, we have a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Meeting minutes are approved. The next, we've got a couple of big items on the agenda today to discuss. First one is the SELCO Employee Handbook as revised this month. And is Tracy going to
Yep.
Morning,
introduce yourself, young lady?
Tracy Schultz, Human Resources Manager.
Okay.
This was a lot of work. I wanted to do this since I started, and I'm very excited to finally be here presenting it. Most of the new policies are common sense. For people viewing at home, it's things like workplace bullying, there's a code of conduct, travel policy. If anybody has any questions about anything specific, I'm happy to answer them. And also, I know it's a lot of information, so if we don't want to resolve this today, that's fine as well.
Well, I think we want to resolve it today. And,
I would like
and
that.
I did have a chance, even though it was a pretty hefty amount, to be
Yeah.
able to read it. I think one of the things that I noted was the fact that we now have a kind of set down in writing as to how we hold employees accountable.
Yes.
As far as a formal,
I want it to be fair for everyone, and I want people to know that if there is a discipline issue, what the steps are. So I think it's important, that way it makes sure that everyone is treated equally as well.
okay? And I guess, not to open up Pandora's box on this thing, but maternity leave, it appears to me that male or female, whether it's an adoption or it's the actual birth of a child or some semblance there, that there's not a given number of days vacation, well, vacation, but there is a certain time frame that they can take, but they don't get paid for that right now for family
Yes.
leave, correct?
Under FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, you can miss work, but we do not pay.
Okay.
Which is something I would like to change at some point.
Yeah, well, that's something I think we'll have to wait for, to further guidance from government as to whether that's mandated or not. It's just a matter that, I did note that it's just at least in there and that we've got that ability for.
Yes, it is an option.
For both parents.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is you have a new baby who wants to take off work unpaid.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see us look into paternity leave, maternity leave, and as paid leave.
Yes, I might already have a policy written.
You know,
I bet you do. But we'll take baby steps first.
Pun intended.
Get the guidance, literally, yes, literally figuratively. And so go from there. Any other comments or
also,
questions?
the concept of flexibility so that the leave, for instance, it's not always appropriate, particularly if it's paternity and maternity, to be immediately after you have an infant, or so it's could be any time within some period.
Yes.
But paid leave, I think, is important and kind of more. I don't know what municipalities are doing, but certainly the private sector, it's
Right.
pretty normal.
Yes, I think it's very important.
A question I have is, how is the approach different than, say, Shrewsbury town employee? You know, is this more a private sector feel? Is this very similar to what a town employee handbook would look like, or how are we starting to deviate from, and properly probably, but how are we starting to deviate from a standard town employee?
I think for the most part, we tend to be similar to the town, but we do have more leeway to offer more to employees, which I think is important because we're competing with the private sector. So I think this is a step towards moving away from the town. It's small steps, but I think the town may be implemented, especially the AI thing. That's going to be an issue, I think, that we're going to see. I think the town has already started to address
Artificial
that as
intelligence
well.
and using that for your
Yeah.
deriving of any letters or contracts or any other guidance.
Yeah,
Okay, and that's something the town, well, and I think even I think there should be some commingling, working with the HR on the town side, though, to make sure that we stay pretty much lockstep, though, right?
right.
And you're meeting with Kevin on that, and you're meeting with the HR folks, I hope to make sure we kind of
We are
stay
in
on
touch.
the same lane.
Yeah.
The other question I have is similar, but how does it link up or sync up with union employees? And is there a lot of deviation between policies on how a union employee gets versus non-union? And how do you deal with that?
I saw you nod your head vigorously. Do you want to take that one?
No, that's a great question. We try and, we try and keep them aligned as much as possible. This is a contract year, so with items like these, now we'll have the opportunity to bring those into the contract, so it's kind of good timing between adopting this and reframing the contract. For the most part, a lot of these aren't in there, but in terms of just general benefits and leave allowances and whatnot, we try and keep that where it makes sense, as much aligned as possible.
So is the logic that all these policies apply to all employees except where the contract
Yes.
somehow deviates
Yes.
and
Exactly.
changes the policy?
Yes.
I think on the front page, there's a little, it's stipulates that except as provided otherwise by the collective bargaining agreement. So if it's not in the
Okay.
collective bargaining agreement, it
Well,
defaults to this.
Trumps it. Okay.
Exactly. And these are I'm sorry, just to
No, go
add
ahead.
to your other
Go ahead.
question. They're informed, we're on multiple distribution lists for personnel policies through APPA, so you get somewhat of a national vibe, if you will. We obviously, as we discussed, coordinate with the town on those policies, and so we take all of these inputs and try and incorporate the different elements into this handbook to make sure it incorporates the best of, all of our different inputs.
Did you have the handbook reviewed by an attorney at all, or a consultant specialist, or is it all your?
Some of the policies, yes, the workplace bullying one was a new one. We had a consultant write that. The existing ones, that I just made minor changes to, no. Everything else, I don't think there's any legal
Real
liability.
change.
Yeah.
I told Tracy I wouldn't embarrass her, but she's 2/3 of the way through her HR law school coursework.
Law school, law school.
So it's not informed in complete ignorance, but she doesn't have the degree yet.
Yeah.
We refer that in the Navy as a sea lawyer, though.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, they're not-
Lawyer.
So, but
they
just
don't
to
have
give
a
her.
degree, but they probably want to practice law. No.
Exactly, yes,
I think
exactly.
Maria's son might be a sealer.
I think, yeah, he actually passed the
He
bar.
passed.
But just to give her credit, and
No,
it's
no,
been
it's
helpful because she can take it back to her class.
Yeah.
I know that's.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it's worked out well.
So just a question about the FMLA. Do we participate in the state program? We don't. Okay.
No, the towns usually opt out of that.
You said what, most of the towns opt out?
Most, yes, the towns aren't required to do it, so Shrewsbury did opt out of it. We wouldn't be able to do it separately.
We would not.
No, with
And
stuff
what-
like that, we
yeah,
have to.
so, begging what Maria is asking here, what's the state policy that we're bowing out from?
The state has, it's a program that the employer pays into, and you can take, I don't know the particulars of it just because it doesn't apply to us, but you get a certain amount of leave. They have a few programs like that, I believe, but unfortunately.
pay-
So you get reimbursed,
First,
you could get
okay.
paid
Yeah.
from that, from the state
Okay.
program, like unemployment,
Sure,
right?
okay,
So, that would
Yeah.
kind of like that way,
okay.
Yeah,
like we would get paid, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Where we're not getting paid.
Is there anything else where the town has made a decision that do you think affects our policies?
Right now, I think the town is considering rental leave. So I know that they were looking into it at least a year ago, so I'm hoping that that means that it's coming soon. I mean, I would be fine with moving forward separately as well, but if we wanted to wait for the town to see what their policy is,
Yeah, I think
we could do that.
if we can stay step as
Yeah.
best we can with them to make sure that we're not,
Yeah. I'm hoping.
but then again, don't hold back on our employees either, so.
Yeah, can't wait forever.
Right,
Right.
right.
Okay, anybody have any other comments or questions about this
No,
new employee handbook?
certainly is thorough, that's for sure.
I thought it
Yeah.
was, but,
Great job.
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah,
seriously.
very good.
I mean, it's codified, everything, rather than tribal knowledge, it's actually on paper, and it
Yeah,
really works.
yeah, no, I'm excited, which is sad.
Well,
but
if
really excited.
everybody's happy and doesn't have any other comments, can I have a motion to approve, or accept, I guess, would be the word, or
Yes.
Adopt?
adopt, let you adopt the employee handbook as
Next.
presented.
So moved.
Okay,
Second?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trey.
So you killed us with paperwork.
Yeah.
I'd like to be prepared.
It's a technique.
Great job.
That's a
great job.
technique she learns.
Yeah, yeah, she learned that in the HR course. Right. Okay, okay, so moving on to the next highlights, we've got the electric and cable budget. So the first one we will take on is the 2024 electric budget. A pretty impressive binder and everything else, a good read, and especially after reading that HR
Yeah.
compendium. So, Mr. Zucco, are you going to lead us in this charge?
Yes, I am. So, good morning, everyone.
Good
Morning.
morning.
Good to see you back here for another arousing budget meeting topic discussion. Today, we're going to do things a little bit different. I talked to Chris, and we are going to walk through the budget a little more instead of present it. This is more a little bit in line with how we kind of do the audit. And this way, we're not kind of skipping over any sections or anything. But we wanted to see how this would work in, maybe in future years we'll do this or we'll go back to the presentation. But we figured the presentation's a little more narrative focused, so it only hits certain topics where you guys might have questions in other areas that we can walk through. But so, starting with the budget, we start with our kind of overview for the entire company. And basically, this section just talks about what we have, work in progress or coming up this year. And you can see there's things like the cost of service study that'll look into whether our rates in everything are in line with our expenses. As we just talked about, the employee handbook with updates, where Tracy did a great job. And the way the handbook works now, it also allows us to bring individual policies forward, like parental leave, as we create them. We're still working on employee and team development programs as we have, new hires and trying to get people integrated into both the industries and understanding, how SELCO works. Coming up later this year, we have 2 best practice reviews with NISC. NISC is our new accounting and billing software, and they have a bunch of other products that we use as well. This year in the spring, we're going to be taking a look at our work order process, and we're going to be both going through a kind of APPA training for what are best practices with work orders. Then right after that, meeting with NISC to see, hey, all the stuff we've done since we've implemented, is that the approach we want to take, and how do we adjust things? Because we know that the state with that isn't exactly where we want it yet, but it's progress from where we were. Along with that, in the fall, we have registered for the full financial suite kind of overview to make sure all the changes that we've implemented since going live are going in the right direction, and then any of the items we didn't have an opportunity to utilize going live, take a look at those. And the way these best practice reviews work is they actually send someone out, they take a look at everything with us, and then they help us create a strategy to work with the support team to then implement those things. And sneak preview, we already have one lined up for 2025 for the billing system, because we've been in that one for about a year. And these are just good items to do every few years to make sure we're utilizing all the opportunities we have with our systems. We also, one of the big needs we have identified for this year is figuring out inventory. And I put this as inventory and warehouse because it's kind of a twofold process for us. One, we are kind of bursting at the seams from a space in location type issue with actual stock. So we're trying to figure out both short-term and longer-term solutions with how do we successfully handle that situation. And to give you an example, I was speaking with one of our foremen yesterday, and he wants to start ordering wire for projects coming up, but we have nowhere to really store this wire yet because you can put it outside, but now you're blocking, in the winter, areas that you're now going to have to snow plow and stuff like that. So we have to kind of hold back and gauge the timing. So we're going to be looking at, how do we do some of that stuff and what are opportunities that we have, because everything up until this point's kind of fell through that we've tried. On the inventory side, especially on electric, we'll be increasing what we consider actual inventory. These are items that have been in stock for years but aren't considered inventory. And to touch upon my previous subject of work orders, it kind of factors in at that point, because if the costs aren't an inventory, they don't end up on the work order. So we're going to be taking a look at that stuff this year. As well, we'll be closing out, hopefully, our IT agreement with the town. We've been working on this for a couple years now, but to have a agreement that basically specifies our internal IT department, what they cover for the town, what the costs are going to be, and making sure both parties' expectations are set. We also had a little bit of a workforce update. We're looking at, I think it's 4 new positions this year, one of them actually being for the warehouse position, to have some sort of supervisor so we can figure out and have redundancies and coverage in stuff like inventory areas. The other ones are in a similar vein to kind of bring positions forward that currently today we have a need for, but we don't have anybody that can kind of satisfy them. So some of these we have, internal people who we'd like to see, potentially apply for them so we can step them up, and then bring other people in behind them to kind of bring everything together and hopefully have a nice succession path going forward. At any point in time, if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in and we can make this very conversational. But that's kind of the overview, if you will, for the entire company.
I got a quick one that just kind of, every time I hear that somebody's taken out one of our utility poles, sometimes numerous times to the same pole, with this new inventory and supply methodology, how do we recoup the cost of that utility pole? Is it via insurance?
Yes.
And does part of this inventory help us further identify the cost for all the transformers they take out? Because some of them took out 3 transformers in one SWAT, and that's not a cheap date.
You are correct. So we do, when someone hits one of our poles, we do create a work order specifically for that. We actually create 2 now, because one's for cable and one's for electric, and we like to keep those just a little bit separate. But then those work orders are used to kind of gauge the cost, and then we turn around and we bill that to the insurance company. We are fortunate on the pole side of things, where we have a great company we work with that goes out and they collect the money, and they help us, figure out the game some insurance companies play, because some companies will only pay 80% of whatever you provide them with. So then you have to mark it up just a little bit to make sure you're getting the full recoup costs. But we have those type of companies in place to kind of help us. But the expense is on the person who hits the pole in those scenarios.
Okay.
And so far, since I've been here, I feel like we've recouped majority, if not all, the costs that we've gotten for that.
If they're
one. So
insured.
Yeah, that one's kind of an easy one. Well, I was trying to think. I don't think we've had any that haven't been insured yet. There was one that I was just questioning, but I think we ended up getting to the root of it, because it was more someone took over overhead lines. But they took them out kind of on a private stage. It was a weird situation.
Okay.
But we do recoup for those.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may follow up on the warehouse, we had been talking about the Patrick thing, and it seems like we're shifting, obviously, the shift gears on that. Absent a larger solution like that, well, obviously, I'm assuming the intent of that whole operation is to, or that whole initiative is to look at any and all opportunities for us. And will that include conversations with the town of any available space, or would we even explore, a metal building on some physical space we can find somewhere?
We've had all those conversations. We were very close to being able to rent a temporary space, which would have been perfect for us, because it also had a little bit of office space for us to move employees into. And the idea at that point was, now we'd have enough room to put the majority of our cable supplies in one warehouse, and as we were looking to do renovations to the service area, we could swap employees in and out. And we were very excited. We were all the way at the end, and someone swooped in and got it from us. We have talked about the idea of what items could we potentially move to, even like trailers for Eagle leasing on property that either we own or the town owns. We've looked at or we're currently looking at what's the quickest we could put up just some type of warehouse space somewhere, let's say like a Centec property. This way, maybe it's not the ideal Patrick Subaru warehouse, but when you get to that type of state and you're building something out, now you still have this backup warehouse to do things like store trailers and other equipment that isn't used on the regular, but it's not wasted space. And then even stuff like that, if all of a sudden we notice, hey, there's, rising costs are coming for a certain type of inventory, we could be stocking up on that inventory and putting it in our secondary warehouse, type of stuff. When you look at some of the issues that not having the space causes today, is you might have, a reel of wire that's been used, and you want to continue to keep using that reel of wire, but now you have a bunch of reels out in front of it. So now someone comes in for an emergency job at 3 a.m, is trying to get to that reel, they can't, so they grab the newest reel. So now you have 2 open reels. So now just counting, if it's an inventory item, just counting that becomes more difficult, because how many feet are on each reel? And now you have 2 reels open instead of 1 reel. So those are just some of the logistical issues we see, besides some of the, where do we put stuff?
Yeah.
Because you have some stuff over here and then the same item over there.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm excited about this, because I think also, post-COVID supply chain, everything that kind of happened, the importance of this, I think, to hedge against any of those supply chain issues in the future is really important for us, so.
And I think that's one of the things we want to start building as well, is internal policies for like what type of items we want to keep on hand at what points. So transformers, meters, you want those on hand, but what type of wires, what type of other things? Because certain items may not be as difficult to obtain, so you don't need to keep the stock. So with our new system, we have a lot more invested into the setup of inventory items, and we have the ability to, implement lead times in there, reorder points, and all these other things that they'll have to be maintained throughout time and updated. But once you have those in place, it makes planning, scheduling, everything a lot easier. And the main goal is to get inventory set up to the point where all the items that we believe should be included in the cost of a project are regular inventory. Because if they're not, how are they being included into that project cost? And you could look at some of them for like exempt items like nuts, bolts, pins, staples, things that we shouldn't have to count during inventory. Those will make it in through overhead. But lacking that process for certain other items, we want to start putting it into inventory instead of deciding right away, this is an expense item or this is a capital item, because we don't know where it's going to be used for the job. We want to have better job costing in our work order system, because that'll eventually get us to the point where we'll go, okay, $3,000 to set a pole, we got to set 10 poles, we know the cost. At least a rough cost. We'd obviously do more of an analysis before charging someone or doing something like that, but at least you have an easier way to understand what the costs are.
Great.
So is our immediate need then warehousing?
Warehousing is one of the immediate needs that we're looking into. And we're looking at renting space. We're looking at what opportunities, like we said, we have just for storage locally. And I had a good talk yesterday with one of our foremans, just to kind of go through what kind of options we have today just to utilize in the short term while we try to figure some of this out.
So who's monitoring inventory right now?
We do have an inventory manager, as we call. I don't know what the official title of the position is. That individual's job is what signs out and receives in inventory. The issue becomes is without the defined space, there's too many areas we have inventory stored for one individual to be able to kind of ensure that something's not taken and someone doesn't forget to sign it out. The processes we want to put in place and we have queued up to go would ensure that everything that is in this defined warehouse or space is signed out before it's taken, all of that type of stuff, where today the policy is a little more, take stuff, if you use it, sign it out, if not, bring it back. And that's just from a lack of defined space, and we're actually in the process of moving away from that, but it becomes easier as you start to build out these systems. And certain things just were never considered inventory for years. So now it's, hey, that's now inventory. We have to start retracking it.
Yeah, we have to monitor that, okay.
What generally do you consider the bulk of our inventory?
It changes between both, actually, kind of. It used to be a little different in both industries, but I would say the bulk of the inventory is our distribution network items. So on the electric side, you're looking at your wires, you're looking at conduit, you're looking at all those type of items, poles.
Transformers?
Yeah, transformers are exempt inventory. Transformers and meters we are allowed to capitalize upon purchase because we know they're going to capital jobs, and that lets us recoup costs within the rates right away. and that's a special FERC allowance. So they're just slightly different. They get to be exempt inventory. On the cable side, it's your fiber, your cutouts, nope, not cutouts. What was that? MSTs, and then your, what's the?
Enclosures.
Enclosures.
Finding a little
Enclosures. That's the one I had to figure out, because enclosures, you have them on the electric side and you have them on the cable side. Big difference in cost between the two sides. Much more important when you get to the enclosures for splicing fiber on the cable side.
Are these the green boxes? Plastic green boxes?
No, those are the black kind of cans that you see on this.
Oh,
plan.
okay.
The some companies, and maybe it's over the top, have almost like SKU labeling system relative to inventory. Is that something we're either looking into, or is some of our inventory kind of skewed?
So some is,
Like, check in, check out electronically?
we do check in, check out certain things electronically. We want to get more to that, so stuff is more scanned in and out. One of the end-all be-all, and I always call these plan 10 years goals, but is basically when we're building or designing a job, we have the ability to do that through certain mapping and staking tools that would use what they call assembly or retirement units. Those units then end up pulling in, cost, estimates, everything, but they can also be used to design a pick list. So a pick list would be then given to, let's say, the inventory manager the night before, the day of, and they could have all the inventory ready the next day for crews to come in and grab. Now, the crews still might have to grab additional inventory because, you have 10 nuts and, one crack, so you need, you're not going to come all the way back to the warehouse for something. So there will still be stuff signed in and out, but we do want to get to the point where we're scanning things in and out to make stuff easier. We do that currently with the exempt cable items that are like your ONTs, your modems, your cable boxes, stuff like that, because they're serialized devices in the system. And for the provisioning side of the software, we need either the serial number or the MAC address of those items going to the customer on their account for it all to work.
I think so. Years ago, we may have had an employee where there was an issue with inventory, and then, and I am going way back, I think, and then a little more recently, but not recently, there was a comment from the auditors about segregation of inventory or protection of inventory. So it's something that I think is on, at least on my radar, and that one question, and then so it's kind of not news to me, but understandable that inventory is everywhere, and the inventory manager still can't quite control it all. I thought it was probably a little more under control than that, but I understand the dilemma, or also the effect of the growth and the fiber project kind of maybe affecting that. But one logically would be segregating or protecting more inventory that has higher value. And I'm guessing something like with copper in it or something like that, where that's clearly under more supervision control than maybe something with less value and maybe even fenced off or something like that with a lock. But I have no idea what you have, but I do get concerned about, potential loss of inventory and us not being able to properly manage that or understand whether it's going on or not.
So I'm not as concerned with the ability for someone to steal our inventory because we do have it pretty well secured. So everything is behind some sort of fence or is in some sort of locked building. And the inventory that would be accessible would be very difficult to take. So like our copper, where it's located, how you'd have to go about to grab it, very difficult. It's also one that we tend to have a better count of every year because we also make sure that count, like we put more stock into it, to your point, because we know it's something the auditors are going to check. It is going to be something our auditors will talk about. Again, it'll be on our notes for 2023 because as we're working to fix this, there are those counts that are off, and they've identified it as well as something that we have to look to improve upon. But that is something that we have a lot of focus on, and the question is how. And it's going to be a timing game of what opportunities do we have. And as soon as we can get a little more help around inventory too, I think that'll help out as well. Because not only should inventory be one of those positions that you have redundancy in, right? So somebody's out sick or something, you have somebody that's able to cover that day, but it's one of those higher important positions that you have assets that need to be monitored. So as we kind of take those baby steps forward, my hope is in 2 years you're going to see, okay, now everything that really should be defined as inventory is. Now we have it accounted for, and ideally you have a warehouse space with racks and bays, you have stuff labeled, so this is inventory, have to charge it out. This is non-stock items that you can just take as you need, and those would usually be like on the cable side, the little ends for the coaxial lines, right? They're not that we don't monitor them and we just hand them out willy-nilly, but they're not something that needs to be signed out per job. You grab 10 if you need them, and then when you need more, you grab 10 more. We even would like to expand some of this into being able to track like small tools. So if someone needs pliers, we can have instead of running out to Home Depot when you need pliers or making a special order, we could have a certain set of pliers on stock, managed, and then we could even know, okay, Johnny's taking 5 pliers this year. What's going on with Johnny, right? That's what we're trying to get to. As well, in the same regard, we're looking at areas where we can improve upon things to the point of today, we're using human power to do something, and there should be a tool to do this. So we want to start getting that stuff as well in place, so someone isn't lugging wire over their shoulder and now you have someone making it to retirement with a bad back when there's literally a reel that would go on something and no cost, and it does the same job. But some of those things are also hindered by where do we store it in the winter, or where do we do some of this stuff?
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so that's the first page of 100.
Yeah, that's okay. As you can tell, I'm passionate about this inventory stuff. We're going to slowly but surely get there. The other piece of this just goes over methodology. I won't jump into it quickly. But we will every year try to get closer and closer to our numbers and figure out little things that we don't understand, but this is pretty standard methodology for budgeting. So now on to the electric budget. Now each area of the budget we try to start with an overview, and the overview is designed just to kind of give you either an understanding of that department, area, or industry. And the electric overview, the big thing we wanted to kind of talk about is we're seeing the energy markets start to stabilize a little bit. Well, what does that mean? Because later on, you'll see there's some increased costs in the transmission market. This is, we have Becca here to correct anything I misspeak on because she's the expert more in the power supply area. But this is more referring to specific energy costs. Not transmission in itself. So we're starting to see those numbers stabilize, which is a good thing, and we're hoping to continue to see that going forward.
Could I just ask a couple questions here? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I see so last year we had that volatile winter, we had the big price spikes and the wholesale markets based on fuel dynamics. No. This year, related to last year, we have seems like a significant bump in transmission costs. But you also referenced the Mystic reliability agreement and ISO's winter inventory and energy program. What changed, why the impact on Mystic? Because that agreement has been in since 2018 or something like that?
And it falls off this year, actually.
What's that?
It falls off this year as well.
Yeah, because they closed in it's up in 5 months, right? With Constellation.
Yep.
And then, so assuming nothing, they don't renew that, because it's just so controversial, I don't see that happening. The whole district gas thing's a whole nother conversation, which is a nightmare, but, so that falls off this year, but what is the relative impact of that? Because I would have thought, based off of that volatility of last year in the wholesale markets, we would have seen a little bit more of a significant drop. And then my other question is just what's happening in the transmission line item? Because that would seem to, I think it was over $1 million bump year over year.
So the impact of Mystic plus WEIP is about 240 a megawatt hour, and that's up a little bit from last year, but that per megawatt hour charge was just eclipsed by the energy increase we had last year in the volatility, so we weren't communicating about it a lot. It was there. The WEIP charges are increased this year, and I think they hit us probably mid last year, and that lasts for a couple of years. But like I said, Mystic falls off this year. I think our last payment is June 24. But if you look at the other category that those two charges fall under, compared to recent past budgets, that line charge is up a lot. Probably about 600 to 800K, which is why we called it out in this budget. Like I said, we should have emphasized it last year because it was still an increase, but it was just eclipsed with everything going on with the energy market.
Got it. What line item is that in? Where is that embedded?
See, if you look at the chart on the first page, it falls under the other category. There's other charges within that other category too. There's some ancillary costs and scheduling costs as well. So that other bucket is pretty large. It tended to be more diminutive compared to other charges, transmission capacity, in the past 10 years. But it is something we've seen escalating. And your other question was about transmission, right?
Yeah.
So that is just the regional rates increase, and that's based on our load.
Yeah,
So
what's
we knew that was
driving
coming.
such a dramatic increase? I didn't think it would be.
All the projects coming down the line.
Yeah.
And unlike the other charges that we were just talking about, that are temporary and will fall away, transmission is gonna steadily increase
Oh, yeah.
in the coming year. So it's an extra $1.2 million in our budget this year, which took over the decrease we saw on the energy side. And the rates are just gonna increase. There's big
It's
projects coming
crazy.
down the pipe.
Well, that's the crazy thing is those big projects aren't even live yet. And
Right.
we're already feeling that impact? Wow.
Yeah, so we don't foresee that going away time soon, which is why we're recommending maybe look at our base rates and think about what that impact is gonna be for the next 5 to 10
Yeah,
years.
what's that gonna look like in 5 to 10 years? It's gonna be ugly.
It is. It's already $1 million.
Yeah, right.
You said there's more coming up, so.
And these increases you're talking about in these projects are basically peanut butter spread across all the municipalities and the investment utilities as well.
Absolutely, it's a revenue share
Right.
across all utilities, so we're all enduring this, just like we did last year with the energy spike.
And the transmission, is it becoming more robust? Where are all these costs going?
Good question.
Which project, well, I think you're asking what projects are they
Yeah.
funding?
Yeah.
Where's all this transmission?
Big renewables projects coming down, Hydro, Quebec, and
Okay.
all those. There's the discussion about offshore wind, and like Matt said, that hasn't even hit us yet.
Yeah, right.
So this, I mean, just to put some context here, you know, we basically have the same electric grid, you know, basic design of central generation from when Edison conceived
Yeah,
it, right?
right.
Central point of generation to there, but those points of generation are now changing. So, and the loads are dramatically increasing. We want to electrify everything, right?
Right.
Getting it from point A to point B is a whole different
transmission.
dynamic.
Yes.
And the cost of building a new transmission line now is absurd because of all the permitting, the local, you know, nobody wants a transmission line
Indeed,
anywhere near
yep.
urban. It's just, I don't even know. No one knows.
No.
There's no real system-wide planning going, I mean, there's efforts to do it, but it's a lot of finger pointing of whose responsibility it is.
Right.
It's gonna be interesting.
One thing we do have going for us is we are a transmission owner. We're one of the smallest in New England.
Yeah.
However, we are able to recoup some of our costs. So every year we get an RNS credit for serving. And we've actually had internal discussions about could we be allocating more of our expenses to that to recover. So we'll be looking at that probably later this year, after we do this year's audit.
Yeah.
We'll start thinking about that. So maybe there's some more savings we can get in this area.
Great.
Chris, go ahead, you had-
Oh, I was just going to add, I guess, a couple of quick comments just related to that. To your point about no one really knows what's going to happen. I mean, looking, you know, translating that to a forecasting model, you know, to predict a budget like this is a challenge. We're aware of that, so we take a more conservative approach to make sure we don't introduce unknown rate shock potentially in the future. So we err on the side of conservatism there. And then in our partnership with MWIC, we have that unique ability to also be a partial transmission owner for some of these upcoming projects, which help drive down costs. So we're working on multiple fronts to try and maintain as much cost control over this as possible. But as you can see, there's a lot coming down the pike.
I think some of this will come up in further discussions
Yeah.
later on here.
In one thing, a little on the less technical side, we had done this budget out with numbers that, December, Becca got me numbers that were a little bit older from MWEC, and then she got updated numbers in January. The difference for how that was a massive swing to the financials, which you just wouldn't expect, but that's the most current, numbering. So we could even see this change in 2 to 3 months because of outlooks. So to Chris's point, some of this stuff for the experts and the companies we rely on becomes difficult to kind of gauge where it's at. But it was just eye-opening for someone like myself when all of a sudden I was like, wait, no, I like the December numbers better. How do we get those back? But we want to present what is the most accurate or current forecast picture.
And unfortunately, I had to tell Jim to get used to that $1 million swing either direction is probably going to become more regular just because our budget is much larger.
But so that is the electric overview section. If there's no more questions, we'll jump on over to the income and expense statement. Okay. So taking a look at our income and expenses, we can see our total sales revenue is expected to drop about $7 million from 2023. This is this is mainly because of the GTA approach we took in 2023. So when I was presenting last year, we had a couple different scenarios that we had talked about, and what the circumstances behind those was basically our GTA was set to, at the end of the year, reset to 0, and if we went that approach, we knew we were going to have a loss, mainly contributed to purchase power. So we talked about, instead of keeping it at the current level it's at, because that would have, we knew, way over collected, we kind of halved it and said, right here in the middle, we believe it'll be an over collection, but if it's not, if it is an over collection, we can, bring that to the commission to talk about moving some funds to rate stabilization. I believe energy did end up coming in just a little bit lower, so we ended up with a little bit more in 2023 than we have expected on that side of the books, but that is why you'll see the decrease coming this year, is because we do not have, GTA is set right now to 0, and that is some of what you're seeing when we get to the net income statement or net income portion in a minute. But
just want to point out, these are all estimated values. We did not have December actuals in this analysis, so we'll do another more thorough GTA analysis soon.
Correct. We're still, what was kind of challenging this year is we almost had all the actuals, so it was figuring out which areas we didn't have them to still continue to estimate. Currently, we're estimating that the end of the year will come in about 6.7 million, which part of that, it would end up putting us over the 8% that we could collect for the year, but part of that is to recoup purchase power costs from 2022 of about 1.4 million. And that is what is shown in this chart here. It'll end up bringing kind of the net income of 2022 to 0, and then the adjusted net income of 2023 down to 5.3 million. And we will present in future things to the commission what we are looking to do with the remaining costs for that, for moving stuff into rate stabilization. Taking a look now, our total, the 1.4 we'll cover. Okay, so now we're going to move on to kind of operating expenses. And this year, just to kind of show, how operating expenses have, changed since the pandemic, we kind of broke out each section to show you what is going on and how things relate kind of from 2024's numbers to 2022 and 2023. So if we take a look, quickly at the generation area, it's decreasing from 2022, but is increasing slightly from 2023. Generation area, these are our internal costs, and this is for stuff like the peaking plant, the Centec peaker, and the solar farm stuff. Looking at purchase power, you can see that it is decreasing slightly from 2023 and a little bit more from 2022, and that's partly part of the stabilization of the energy market that we were talking about. There's very little cost internally baked into this category. The majority of it is just passed through. Looking at transmission, our transmission, obviously this is the one we were just talking about, is expected to increase over 2022 and 2023 numbers. We do have a portion of internal costs that go to transmission, but they are more around the, I want to say $500,000, just off the top of my head, range, and those have kind of maintained stable, and that's also for like the Centec transmission stuff, I think Ralph, we have transmission on, Ralph as well, so it's the costs that are associated with keeping those areas in, and as Becca previously mentioned, because we get that credit, we're going to kind of look internally to, what other costs should go to this area. So for example, part of my salary looking into, the transmission stuff should be allocated there. We do have a portion. Some of Becca's salary, some of Chris's, because we do spend time in those PTF meetings going over those type of things, and that's all costs that we want to look to recoup. But we want to get more advice at what are the breakouts that we should be looking at for those areas, because is there any missed opportunity to recoup?
Could I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to slow things down, Mr. Chairman. But I'm looking at these numbers, and then I just go back to like the pie chart, like what we were looking
Yep.
at earlier. The numbers are a little bit like, how do we read that pie chart and then look at these numbers? Are they different time periods?
So those are individual line items within these major buckets.
Right, so the power supply cost, is that like purchased
So
power?
that's energy, capacity, RECs. I think that covers the generation bucket, right, Jim? Is there anything else in there? That's Jim's major accounting bucket that is presented in this pie chart. And then transmission is straightforward, that's just what, and then, like I said, the other bucket has those other miscellaneous charges.
Okay.
Yep, so
Because I'm
this,
just a little confused on,
so these will stack up all these different line charges. Although this page that Jim is going through is not just power supply. So he's
Right.
honed in on a couple power supply charges,
Right.
purchase power, generation and transmission, but the rest is outside of the purchase power budget.
okay.
And that chart is only purchase power.
So if you were to look at the purchase power costs plus the transmission costs, there's a little bit of extra in there for internal, but that's what makes up the pie chart.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so taking a look at our distribution, we are up from 2022 and decreasing from 2023. Now, as we look at the next few categories, these are more internal cost categories, and a couple things have kind of happened in the last few years. We've changed systems, and with some of those system changes, we've kind of changed methodology. So where certain areas previously may have been defined, so somebody's salary, so a certain portion of it was always allocated to a certain type of expense. Now some of those employees are actually recording their time where they're using it. We are careful about keeping the division between electric and cable, but from a, before, if something was technically being charged to capital without knowing it was going for capital, that would now change because the person is assigning the jobs right to, or the labor right to where it is worked. So some of these numbers, things have shifted around a little bit over the last couple of years. So I just wanted that to be understood as well, and we're still kind of understanding some of the impact of those changes to be like, okay, is that what we're looking to see, is that appropriate, or is there some tweaking of the system we have to do? Taking a look at the customer and sales bucket, you can see that there is a decrease coming in 2024 from 2023, but there is an increase up from 2022. Now, some of this is based on what I was kind of mentioning earlier. As I went through this, implementation, we found certain areas where employee salaries were in one area, and we decided, what they do technically should fall under a different bucket. So, for example, some of the marketing salaries were moved from just general and admin over to our 913 account, which is to handle marketing. So there were certain maneuvers like that. As well, the reason why 2023 in this area was a little bit higher is we were running overlapping systems at certain points. So even though the new system went in April, we still had to pay certain costs for our other systems for the next few months to make sure we still had access to them. There is still one redundant system that we need online until we move over to, I believe it's Minerva or streaming completely, because that's what provisions the legacy signal stuff. So some of those costs, that's why you're seeing that jump in 2023 in that area. Taking a look at the general and admin section, you can see that there is been a steady increase since 2022, and some of this is related to the increased cost that we're experiencing in things. We've noticed some increases in our insurances, which I also have to compliment them because they've done a good job in areas that they can to keep other ones flat. We've noticed, with new employees, you have to send people to training. We've been hiring more consultants to make sure we're heading in the right direction of things. So you can see some increased costs there in those type of things. But this is where we kind of see this leveling off kind of going forward, is in this type of area. The last one is depreciation. This comes from our plant. So on the electric side, we depreciate 3% of our plant assets every year. So as our plant increases, depreciation expense increases. One of the thought processes of a Massachusetts municipal light plant in the laws that were created for this was that in the rate design, you would have this stuff being recaptured, and the cost that's being recaptured for this, the money being brought in, would be used to fund future capital. So whatever your depreciation expense is at the end of each year, you would offset that with capital spend that year that was appropriate, and then you transfer that into your depreciation bucket. If you spent more than this amount, you would move it out of your depreciation fund. So these are kind of the overall operating expenses we're looking at for 2024. From a non-operating expense and other income, we noticed that those items are slightly increasing in 2024, and some of that, like the operating income we get from that, is like our pole rentals, our scrap, when we recycle things, and then various customer charges that we have directly for certain items. From other deductions, you're looking at the debt service payments that we have from the bonds for the peaker and the solar farm. But so those are kind of the expense area. Any questions? Okay, so we'll jump down to net income. So one thing that was difficult with putting together this budget again was it was kind of the third year in a row where we anticipated a net loss, and that always stops my heart for a minute when I'm looking at all this, and then we struggled to try to figure out, okay, what's going on and where is this kind of coming from, so we can kind of understand the situation, especially coming off of a year where we had what looked like a very high net income. Well, last year's net income was basically held up by the GTA rates, or the GTA rate and recovery. The one good thing is right now we are looking at a loss of about $1 million I think it's 1.1 exactly. But the over collection from last year can be used to cover this year. The mechanism for how we would do that is we'd take the over collection of GTA, we'd put it into the rate stabilization fund as of 2023. That reduces the amount of net income that we have for 2023, and then any funds that we would need to offset this in 2024, we could remove at that point in time to offset the increase for the transmission. That said, that would bring us to a zero net income. A zero net income is not where we want to be every year, because things like just our pilot payment in general, that comes out of our net income. So with the adjustments we made to pilot payment, just making something like $1 million in net income, you have, what's it, 900,000 coming out at that point for pilot. So that doesn't leave the company with a good surplus there. One of the things that we have on schedule is a cost of service study this year to kind of understand, is each section of the rates designed to cover the area of spend, and to understand that more. But just from a gut analysis, having done this 3 years in a row, kind of the first numbers we see are losses, it tells me there has to be some adjustments to the rates increasing in certain areas.
Okay, so the rate stabilization, you're gonna put that in a fund, and then you fund your losses with that, right? Like, so that gets moved into income from the balance sheet. How many years can you keep that in there to cover losses?
So I don't know if there is a limitation on rate stabilization. It's designed to be there in perpetuity.
Indefinite.
So,
Yeah, we
So it'll
can
just sit there, so
Yes.
it'll just sit there for when we need it.
yes,
Okay, so the $1 million loss that you're projecting, does that include the $900,000 pilot?
no.
No.
Okay, so.
2 million.
We
so
can't,
The loss would really be
well, we,
closer to 2, right?
we
Because-
technically can't budget pilot into our numbers, because pilot is a contribution we decide out of surplus.
Okay, so if there's no surplus, then it's just the minimum, which is why you're just budgeting, why you're saying the minimum. But then it's going to be reflected on the financial statements later, right? So like, you're going to see the pilot generating a loss after you've stabilized the rate, right? Like,
Our
it'll put us in a
cash-
lot, it'll, right?
Cash will be-
Yeah, okay. Because the payment that we made for 2023 was 1.2, right? It was like it was in the
you
pilot payment was in the.
You include
in the-
cable.
Yeah, the cable as well, though, he's on the
Okay,
electric rate.
yeah.
Yeah, so one thing just to clarify as well, the surplus does not have to be necessarily in the given year. So if you've had surpluses for 4 years in a row, you could still use your, retained surplus to contribute to pilot. That's how we are able to, make pilot payments, was it
2 years.
last 2 years ago, yeah.
2022.
I get the numbers confused when there's so many different years. That's how we were able to still go with that. Going forward, we don't want to keep going with that philosophy because that's not a winning results in the long run. As well, when you start to look at some of the capital spend that we predict in the next few years that'll be needed, that's money that can come off the top of surplus as well, right? So things that you would fund there potentially as well. So we don't want to handcuff us into just saying, okay, we're making just enough money to cover the pilot and we're good. We need to come up with a philosophy, and this is what we do in the cost of service to say, here's our target net income, because this is what gives us healthy financials. So there should be kind of a methodology for what do we want our rate stave to be? 4 to 6 months of covering power supply. What do we want our operating cash to be at? So that this way we know these are our targets, here's how we get to these targets based on rates.
I don't know if I may add. Just to share how I summarize it in my mind, is this is a nice way to look at it because our GTA is currently set to 0. So using our 2022 forecasted expenses compared to our base rates as they are set today, this is a reflection of what would happen if we did nothing. Whereas GTA is intended to be a temporary, short-term adjustment to essentially fuel costs variability. And so right now, this is, as outlined, is what would happen if, you know, like I said, if no action was taken with respect to rates, whether it be GTA or a base rate increase, to Jim's point, seeing multiple years of low to no surplus is generally an indication of a base rate adjustment, because you're seeing a more sustained cost increase. So that's what these rate consultants have been retained, so we can look at the fact that these are no longer necessarily considered short-term costs that we overcome with short-term GTA, but rather a sustained increase that, hey, maybe if it goes away longer term, we can do a rate decrease. But we're seeing, just in terms of rate making practice, these are sustained increases that we should readjust our base rates to.
And those rates include your transmission costs and everything else, too,
Yes.
which we already see and are gonna go through the
Gonna
roof.
go up,
And there's no, in using GTA to correct for that is not what the GTA is set up to do.
Exactly.
So when is this proposed rate increase gonna be?
Well, we still have to look at
don't
it.
know, you're
but
still looking
we're
at it, right?
Maybe mid-year.
Mid-years?
I think we're starting to talk about it so that the public can be aware that
Right.
Yeah.
it's not a free ride.
And one of the things with, you know, because I'm newer to this industry, so I go to these classes and you start to learn all this stuff. In being a consumer myself, you're sitting there and you're going, this is so interesting. But one of kind of the philosophies of, it really is, some of the philosophies of rate design, right, is you would prefer steady rate increases yearly over massive rate increases every few years. And at some point, I really want to jump into Excel and do some of the numbers out to this. But even if you were to do something like a 1% rate increase over 10 years compared to at the end of the 10th year, a 10% rate increase, the money to the company ends up being in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars that the company would receive. At the end of the day, you're more likely not just going to get that 10% rate increase, you're going to get a 10 and then some additional ones. From a customer perspective, going up $10 a year isn't a big deal, or $10 a month a year. You know, you can budget for that. But all of a sudden, you get that shock when 10% or 15% increases come through, or you get 5 or 6% for multiple years to try to play catch up. That's where all of a sudden your heart starts to pound. You're going, I can't predict this spend. So that's kind of one of the things I've learned since being in this industry, that you have to have sensible rates. And you don't want things to be overcharged, but you don't want to just have them be low, 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 because that's always the thought process is no increases, whether it's, you know, taxes, rates, anything. We want everything to stay low, but you're not necessarily applying the correct expenses of the company to the right population. You just end up pushing it forward.
When do we think the consultant report, what's their timeline, and what's their
Sure.
general?
So we've, well, I guess arguably, we've done the hardest part and secured Baker Tilly as our rate partner. So really, I think the next step is to get their data request with Jim's financials as we get the actuals to come in. We with an approved budget, we can then feed them those two primary data points to start that.
Yeah, we started the conversation with them in the fall, and I pushed them off because I go, let's get the 2023 actuals and let's get the budget for 2024 instead of trying to use 2022 actuals and 2023 budget. It's just, those are stale numbers. And as I saw with just a power supply update from weeks apart, granted the original forecast we used was a couple months older, that could be a big change. So everything going on schedule and timeline, mid-February, we'll have all the numbers closed for 2023, and we should be at that point able to push forward with a cost of service.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Any additional questions before we move on to the revenue in-depth?
Let's go for it.
Okay.
We
I-
live for this.
I know. And just so everybody at home that's watching, this is the,
Yeah, I think it's just the cord.
Okay, I hope people can see it.
We lost these two, you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are just the charts that support all the numbers that we are showing. And we did an adjusted chart this year just to kind of show what numbers would be like had we using the GTA to correct the losses. I won't go too heavily into this. We do a breakdown of each type of revenue, and this is more of a historical thing. I think next year we're going to kind of create or build out a purchase power and revenue forecast area to more highlight what our integrated resources team does and kind of give you higher numbers. But this just breaks out all the different revenue categories that we have and what we expect. And as you can see here, there's a percentage of what amount of electricity usage we believe is going to happen by rate class. And this is done by historical trends. And then just the charts to support that.
What's in the category of green power?
It's the green light program.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's the one that residents opt into.
Yep.
And voluntarily add an extra charge to their own bills to get us to buy and retire Class 1 mass mix.
I'm one of those. I don't have.
Oh,
green,
okay.
I don't have a green bulb though.
No green bulb.
One thing to
You're
note
not even part of
too,
the 0.1%, you're part of the 0.02%.
one of the things we do, we are adding this year is we're going to start tracking our public EV chargers revenue. So I'm figuring out how to include that in some of the financials going forward.
Good.
And then we just have the charts representing the revenue by quarter. And now we are on to capital additions and retirements. One thing that we kind of changed this year on the electric side was instead of just showing, here's the entire capital spend that we had, because the last 2 years we proposed about $6.5 million to spend, and we haven't been able to come close to adding that amount of additions, was we tried to pick a realistic number of what additions we think is going to come in this year, which is about 3.5 million, but we want to show you all the different possible projects that this could be worked on over. And the reason for this is, take our transformer shortage, we may not be able to do certain capital jobs, and we may have to do other work instead because we can't get certain supplies for those jobs. As well, you have developers coming to town, and we don't have a prediction for who's going to come in when and what they're going to be looking to do, so some of those jobs can jump in priority. Other capital purchases, we might put in a PO this year, and it's not going to come until next year. So we just wanted to kind of show what the picture and what we're working on, but some of these items for the last 3 years, they've been on this budget, and it's like, well, why haven't you done anything about them? It's not that simple, is what I kind of started to realize, so I wanted to give more of a realistic look in what we think this spend is going to be. So one of the projects we have is controlled by National Grid, and this is a wave and trap design for some of the transmission stuff. We can't start without National Grid. Another project, we have the AMI meters going on. We plan to continue to implement at our, I feel like, record pace right now. We're doing a great job getting them in. So we're going to continue that project next year. We're looking at potential service area improvements. Some of this is to maintain the integrity of the building. Some of it would also be looking to expand the current space inside that building to handle additional employees. We have the police station solar project, and for those of you who don't know, there was still some bond money left over from the police station that they were looking to use for solar, and they've solicited our help. Yeah, they've asked us for help, and we are going to be kind of driving that project. The costs internally are going to be very low. I think it's at most $70,000 because we will be using the bond money. At the end of the day, we will capitalize the total purchase price for the total cost for this as our asset, and we will run it in the future.
Now, those solar panels are all going on the roofs of the, where they park their cars. There's nothing going on the top of the actual police station, correct?
It's combined.
Oh, combined? There is some going on the roof?
Yep.
Oh,
Great.
It was built with that intent.
The other stuff we'll be working on is we'll continue to do EV charger deployments, and we're going to figure out where the best areas in town again are for those. I've listed a bunch of the construction projects that we have, in progress or on our radar. We're working right now to kind of change our capital planning process and have like a 3 to 5 year plan based on projects and purchase spend that we choose. But these are the projects this year, and I was told that, I think it was Crescent Street, that's such a massive project, it could take all year. Then jumping down, we have a bunch of general substation equipment and replacements for things, new breakers, feeders, reclosers. We're going to be purchasing certain tools for testing equipment. We're looking at upgrading the security system and key fob access to those buildings. Those items will require IT's assistance, so they are placed in kind of a queue of all the different projects IT has for the year, and then when they can get to them for a timeline. We also will be looking at upgrading our SCADA system, and this will include both the hardware and software for that system. And again, a lot of these projects, we may start doing stuff this year. Some of the spend might still be in CWIP by the end of the year, basically construction work in progress, so it's not officially capitalized. But these are kind of the items, and I broke out the most probable items in the notes that we feel as though will come in, and what amounts they'll come in to add to the capital addition charts. So as you-
Well, sorry, when you say SCADA system upgrade, is there like a single SCADA system, or like on one of the substations, or?
I believe we have a single SCADA system, and we're looking to upgrade it. I know it's been it's needed upgrades for the last couple years, and I believe this is the year that we think we can get more progress toward it. But I don't understand the inner workings of all.
What does SCADA stand for again?
System control, automation, DA, something.
Yeah.
A plus.
System controls type thing, right?
From my non-technical understanding, it's basically so you can remote control the different things in the substations.
Right, okay.
From an engineer?
Yeah, it's,
Very good.
we'd be looking to do the umbrella platform, not just one location.
Okay.
but It would be the umbrella system
The whole
itself.
thing.
Got ya.
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
So this chart just basically shows the capital additions we plan over the different years. This
Sorry,
chart,
sorry. As we build and build, and bring in better things, we've got a lot of infrastructure that's getting pretty darn old. So what's our plan? Where is that covered in here? I'm sorry.
those are these projects here. Oops. So these construction projects here that's that area. So that would be replacing infrastructure that we currently have in those areas. Some of it could be poles, wires, conduit, any of those type of things. But that's what we're including that kind of makes up the infrastructure. The goal is to slowly but surely, over the next couple of years, start to be able to budget a couple years ahead or have a plan, but to kind of utilize our internal systems to say, okay, here's the design we're thinking, what are the costs based on the design? I can't wait for that.
Yeah, and converting from what, 4 kV to the 13.8, you're putting in all new wiring there, so that's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, plus, we've got a lot of old buried conduit. When you say conduit, it's kind of like just hard wire, right, that's underground, that's got to be replaced somewhere along the way.
Correct.
Are we doing kind of a study on points of failure that these are areas that we really have to take a closer look at?
So there's a bunch of new tools that are coming into place as of the next year or so with our software. So one of the ones we're just actively went live with is our OMS system on the electric side, which is basically outage management system. And the nice part is customers now could go on to their app and they could see, do I not have power? And that sounds, a little, funny, like, how do I know I didn't have power? but you may be in a situation where you're not home, you're somewhere, and you find out you don't have power, why go home, right? But it'll.
Isn't that what social media is?
So
It seems like it. Everyone says, oh, I lost my power.
exactly, but
It's a-
this is our preferred method of communication over social media because customers can actually say they're without power, and this will help us locate where the power outage is, hopefully quicker than we could identify. As well with this software is we're coming in with what they call data analytics. That's supposed to help show how the electricity is flowing through the system. And I think once we get to that point, combined with a lot of our mapping stuff, and we have all that information in there, we're gonna start to be able to see, we have so much of this type of wire in the ground, we have to replace that area. And then looking at a 3 to 5 year plan, you go, okay, what's priority? Like, what do we have to do? And we might swap things in and out over the course of years based on either budget constraints, supply chain constraints, or, wow, we have to do these 2 in this year or else, we can't upgrade X, Y, Z, those type of things. Now, taking a look at this chart, this is one of the things I'm excited about for the future is capital retirements. One thing the industry does not do well is retirements. So we end up having extra items that are either fully depreciated or have very little bit more to go on the books. And to kind of give you an example of this year, I broke out all of our vehicle assets into individual vehicles. And so now we have each vehicle, in our asset database, and we did this because we retired 2 vehicles this year. We sold them at JJK in auction, and we were able to do that through the system. While I was breaking those out, there was about $600,000 of fully depreciated expense still on the books that I have no vehicles for. So you're going, where is that? And that's because historically you're making best guesses at what is coming out of the system based on processes and standards to say, okay, we removed this many items, we think that cost is X. As we build up our work order system, this stuff's gonna start to flow in and out automatically. So you're gonna see, we removed 10 poles. That 10 poles, what's the average cost of a pole? And it's gonna reduce it right from our fixed assets. And then the additions for those 10 poles are gonna flow right in. That's where our ultimate goal for all this stuff is. And I just wanted to highlight that one thing because it's gonna slowly but surely get better. We didn't do any transfers, and this gives the look of our total plant in service currently. Here is just a quick chart that shows the additional spend that we plan for things like inventory, and I'm still trying to figure out how this plays into everything, but I think it's more of a cash flow item than anything. So now jumping down to the cash statement, we are looking at an overall negative cash flow of about 1.8 million. When we look at our starting cash balance, we are at about 10 million this year. Now, the reason for that is because of the increase in the GTA last year. It brought up I believe our starting cash was around 6 million in 2023, and we ended with 10 million. In certain scenarios, having the negative cash flow is not a positive thing. We'll talk about when it is when we get to the cable section. But looking at this, we just want it to be understood. We're starting the year at 10 million, and we'd be going to the end of the year at 8 million. And this is not considering transferring any money into rate stabilization. Now, jumping down to the next page, one of the things I took a look at was I tried to take a historical approach to see where these numbers have been in the past. Because when you start to look at certain things and you see them declining, you instantly think this might not be a good thing, but where are historical averages? And as you can see from 2014, we've slowly but steadily built up our operating cash. Now, going from 2021 to 2022, you can see a quick dip in that. That was us funding our MWEC, working capital account. Thank you. And we still have that money today in our working capital. Our current working capital balance is like 6 million. So it's not like that money disappeared. We're utilizing it on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis to pay and cover our purchase costs. And we get a nice little sheet that tells us how much we have in there from MWEC every month. But I just wanted to show that from where we were to where we are, it's not necessarily a terrible outlook. But at the same time, we want to monitor this because, you know, we could see we steadily started increasing, and now we're starting to spend money in certain ways. But I do still believe that when we do the rate analysis, we are going to need an adjustment because we don't want to see it just continue to dip, if that makes sense.
As we contemplate the capital improvements that you mentioned, how do we make a decision on when to draw and how much out of the MWEC account versus other funds to fund those?
So the working capital account is actually just a purchase power.
Purchase power.
Yes,
okay.
so basically,
You wouldn't want to.
we have, yeah, and we can't touch that, that's MWEC spends that. So every, week, there's different bills that come due for us. MWEC pays those bills on our behalf, and I think those are all ISO New England. Yeah, they're the ISO New England charges, which is our region's energy provider. Would that be a category?
Sure.
Energy provider.
Grid operator.
Yeah, they're the grid operator. So we have to make sure we make those payments in a timely manner. There's no way if we were handling that, we'd be able to cover that and not have costs. So MWEC pays those on our behalf, and then every month, provides us with a bill summarizing all of that information, and then we refund. So it's basically like we have a retainer with them, they draw down from it, and then we just replenish.
Okay.
And it used to be a balance of, I want to say, 1.5 million, and that would be sufficient to cover our monthly bills, but with the increases in all the energy areas, it was not enough anymore. So that's why you did that transfer a couple years ago, to make the balance much larger, to handle all those invoices.
Well, plus they wanted a shorter turnaround too, right? Wasn't
Yes.
that we were doing it quarterly or whatever, and they were doing it bi-weekly, and it was just
Yes.
too hard to handle, and the better off funding it, and
Well,
that's what I recall as far as.
Yeah, and if we didn't do that, there's a potential we'd have to borrow from MWEC and pay,
Yeah.
If
It was a
if it's all of a sudden $1 million to help cover, they're gonna charge us an interest rate on that million, so we had the money, we might as well fund it.
Use the money, right.
And that's similar, is the same concept of like the rate stabilization. Even though we'd be transferring money over, it's still our money, right? It just sits with MWEC, it stays there, and we can draw upon it as we need. We just have to make decisions to, appropriately draw upon it when needed. Because even though the GTA is a short-term fix, rate stabilization is still meant to be a longer short-term fix, but not a permanent solution. Because you still would want whatever that balance is at rate stabilization to maintain there. So if you use it for a year, the next years you should be, collecting more to fill it back up.
Does Emma give us any interest on that money, like a cash?
I believe so.
They do.
I have yet to be able to find where they keep all the numbers for that one. Their website, they have a bunch of different documents all over the place, and I was looking this morning quickly to be like, oh, what's the balance in there today?
We looked last week too.
Yeah.
Same thing, we were both.
I couldn't find it quick enough. But yes, we do get interest from them for most things, which we don't get when we store money with the town.
Right.
Ooh, ouch.
I'm just saying.
Boom. The bing.
And so here's the cash flow chart, and you can see we have our operating fund, we have our depreciation fund, our PCA fund, and our construction fund, and then our petty cash, and then this is our total position for cash for the year. So that is kind of the end of the electric portion of this.
Well, our agenda says that we're supposed to review and consider approval of this budget. So with the bottom line is the bottom line. How about summarizing real quick what are we really improving here?
So this year, we're looking at a net income of about a -$1 million right now, if we keep things the way they are. We're looking at going through a cost of service study, which will help with either a rate design proposal to increase to make this a more favorable position. Right now, we're looking at a current capital spend of about 3.5 million, which is about, I'll say, half of what we probably need but won't be able to do within the current year. And then when you take a look at our cash flow, if we do have some type of adjustment throughout the year, I think that'll put us in a position where we'll be able to place our money into rate stave successfully, bringing that up to where it should appropriately be and still have enough cash flow to cover the capital and operating expenses for the year.
Anybody have any more questions on the budget for electric? And hearing none, do we have a proposal or to accept I guess we are approving the
Yeah.
2024 electric budget?
Yep, so move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, great.
Okay.
Becca, it was nice seeing you.
I'm gonna send you
And now is Joelle coming down here to?
changing of the guards.
Yes, all about cable, the fun
Okay.
stuff.
Now,
It's the easier stuff right now.
His opinion, of course.
Mr. Chairman, just as they're transitioning, I would say I, just my opinion, but I like this format of review. I find it easier to follow myself.
Yep.
And it's probably less work for you not having to create another PowerPoint, so.
Either way, I just, me and Chris talked about it earlier, we're like, instead of just having, when you do the PowerPoint, it's more of a narrative of what we want to talk about. So if there's something in here that you guys wanted to question, it becomes a little bit harder. So we wanted to try this out and see how it worked.
well,
Good.
correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we get the budget in March or April? We didn't do it in January,
I think
did
it was it February?
We were
It might have been
slightly delayed, but I mean, we're on time, we got it,
Yep.
you're coming along, the 3+ years you've been working, making
Yeah.
all this, thrashing through it, and making it great, that's good for electric side. At least we know what the true story is and where we're headed. Unfortunately, it's not all with a big bow on it that makes us all happy that we're getting a present, because we realize that somewhere along the way, this coming year, we're probably gonna have to raise rates.
Yeah,
We're gonna do that judiciously and through a study process and making it happen that way.
exactly.
Great. I hope we have as good news with the cable side.
We do. So on the cable side, just to jump into the overview a little bit, as everybody knows, we're doing a massive fiber project and still building out the infrastructure for that. Joel's team's been doing a great job, and there are a bunch of constraints, but we do have we have the phase 2 starting to kick off, and more of the IFBs for that, which are the invitation for bid? Invitation for bid, so that's basically where we start procuring the items, and we can have the stuff for the next phase. As well, we'll be switching everybody over to streaming in the next year or two. I put the caveat because I don't really know yet. But we'll be moving everybody over, so that's one of the big projects that will be happening on the cable side. And as well, from a head-end perspective, there will be, network upgrades and other type of things that are just kind of standard that we do every year. But our main focus is mainly on those big projects that, we know about. Jumping in to take a look at the revenue for cable, we are looking at a decrease. We're looking at a decrease of about $1 million, and Signal's the main driver for this. We're going to be expecting a decrease of about 1.6 million on the Signal side. And what this is attributed to is both how we assume when we make the transition over to streaming, we will potentially lose certain customers, but as well, we will lose cable box revenue we currently have today. We do have a cable box solution for customers. It is going to, be probably a little less than a year to recoup the cost of those cable boxes. And then we will have a much smaller cable box revenue, more appropriate for what we want to base our financial outlook on. We don't want to be relying on that much revenue from cable boxes. When we take a look at the phone revenue, we do expect that to decline on the residential basis just slightly. We notice people as they move into town really aren't going with the, our phone system. Everybody's more going to this model now for everything. We do still have a decent amount of business customers, but we do notice that phone revenue in general is going to trend down. On the positive side, we do see broadband revenue increasing, which will help support this. And what we're noticing is as people switch over to fiber, they are increasing the speeds and accesses and stuff. So that's on the good side. People seem to like the fiber product, and they like once you start to get to that new speed, you want more. From a other income, we do get a little bit of income coming in through third parties, and Joel might be able to explain some of this better, but basically we have customers, or we still have ad revenue that comes in from the signal cost, but also on the broadband side, we get additional money from certain third parties for using our network. And I still don't understand fully why they pay us for everything, but they're riding on top of our network. So we get a little bit of money for that. What's it like? Is it Netflix? Amazon?
No, sure. It's usually the larger customers that they like to manage their own network. Like, for example, corporations like UMass, for example, the big buildings, they have a lot of customers connected. Users connected on their side. So they like to manage their own. And just like them, and I mentioned them because they're the largest, we have some others. So they lease our fibers, and they buy their own bandwidth, similar to what we do.
Oh,
So
okay.
UMass Medical is what you're saying.
Presidential offices, UMass presidential offices, here on Maple Ave.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So when we jump down to expenses, we could take a look, and one of the big changes I made last year, and I've been working toward this, is we've broken out our expenses to kind of flow in line with the 3 different services we're offering. Technically 4 because legacy cable over fiber. But what we'll be doing in these expense buckets is instead of just having an expense that's, head-end expense, we've broken out head-end expense into hardware, network, and software. So in each one of those categories, those are the major buckets that you guys will see in the financials going forward. In those buckets, we have areas for each type of service. One of the challenges is going to be over the next couple of years is figuring out the best way to allocate some of the expenses to each bucket. So for software, we know someone like Alianza is our phone vendor. Boom, that's quick, easy, we know that. For something like a server that we buy, we have 10 servers, we buy a maintenance contract for all those servers, and those servers cover each service. How do we break that out? So that's stuff that we're going to be working on over the next few years to say, how do we allocate portions of that? But I just wanted to highlight that we're doing some of these changes based on some of the feedback we got in past cost of service study to help us understand, how much of your costs are actually for signal, how much of your costs are actually for phone, and how much of your costs are actually for broadband versus legacy network. So now we have those buckets kind of set up, and we'll be utilizing those going forward, and you will see them over here in this operating category. There's 2 new buckets of head-end hardware expense and head-end software expense. And we've tried to align some of these operating expenses to be more in line with the actual business side of things. So transmitting expense, you'll notice it kind of goes down year over year. Well, previously we had included costs in that were for what I'll call more general plant, and that would be your distribution side of things. So as we shifted, now transmitting expenses is purely costs that we use to transmit anything. So if we have maintenance of our towers or fixtures, or if there's any maintenance that goes toward the Parker Road building that is utilized, just the area from SMC, right? If we're just fixing up, some maintenance in their area, well, we consider that a transmitting cost because we're fixing up the area of the building used to transmit stuff. Connectivity is going to be our expenses that are included to pay for cable or signal cost, to pay for our connectivity to broadband and phone. Distribution expenses will still maintain to be the costs of the infrastructure, and general plant we're adding in there, that's going to be anything that services Parker Hill Road. Where this change comes into, when you're looking at the numbers year over year, there were certain costs that we had that were for utilities for Parker Hill that were going directly to the head end. But those costs for electricity and for whatnot were actually for the entire area of the building that we house. So we just made some changes there to kind of pull it out, because that's not purely a head end expense. That's the entire building expense. So when you're looking at the year over year numbers, it changes just slightly. But now just taking a look, the distribution, they're projected to remain relatively flat in 2024, and a lot of this is due to the fact that the majority of the work we're doing is capital. Customer service expenses are expected to increase slightly, and a lot of this is due to just like your regular inflation stuff. And when we take a look at general and admin expenses, they're expected to increase about $400K, and there's a few different factors that drive this. You have your inflation, and then some of the accounts, or some of the moving of accounts that I did for certain costs. Taking a look at our debt service, right now this is primarily funds for the bond. We took out a $15 million bond to cover the fiber to the home project. And we usually have interest we have to pay on the bond that comes in there. Taking a look at our overall net income, we expect it to drop a little bit. I think it's about $600K in 2024, and that is before you look at our IT agreement. When you factor in our IT agreement, it drops a little bit more because if everybody recalls, we now have a new section where what our internal IT department is doing for the town, we try to budget out over the course of the year. We say, and I'm just picking a number, it's going to cost us $800,000 for the year, and if the actuals come in at $900,000, the difference of that is going to be non-cash pilot contribution. So when we take a look, we're expecting for 2024 about $260K of this expense, which just drops our net income down from $4.1 million to $3.8 million. And then this chart just shows everything in quarterly. Any questions on the, okay. On the capital additions, the main project we have going obviously in 2024 is the fiber to the premises project. I think it's about 30% of the plant we expect to have installed, hopefully, if everything goes well in 2024. We have some network upgrades that will be coming in. We're still working on our HFC proliteration. And this is basically to increase the amplifiers for our?
Yes, it's usually to make repairs or extensions of the cable plant where fiber has not been built yet.
So it's just basically maintaining that plant or putting stuff in charge. The costs for this one have significantly dropped. This is just to make sure until the end of the fiber project, we are able to maintain costs or maintain service to customers. Some of these costs in the next couple of years may transition over to expenses over capital because we know we'll be decommissioning that plant.
Are we doing any more splitting of hubs or?
That's included in there. If, we did one in November. That was the last one.
Because there are some, with the delay with fiber coming to some of the areas are still,
Correct.
demand is
They
still
keep
there.
growing, demand keeps increasing, so we have to allocate more capacity as needed. So we are only doing it as needed.
Okay.
Could I just a quick question on, you said 14 nodes, 30% of the total plant converted to fiber by, when did you say, the end of the 2024?
Hopefully the end of 2024, yeah.
And so what's the timeline on what we're anticipating to have sort of full closure on the cable and decommissioning of
So
that end?
for a total build out, we are expecting the end of 2025. To have all customers migrated, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Because it's a matter of scheduling. Can you be at home? I mean, can the customers be at home at a certain day? So that has to be more of the struggle with, as you know, a lot of people are working now from home, so they cannot lose their internet service. So it is working around their schedule. As he probably mentioned earlier, we have, as of the end of last year, we have 50% of the plant already built on fiber, but we only have probably 35% of the customers own fiber. So it's that, that difference that we have to keep pushing customers to fiber.
So that 30%, is that an additional 30% on top of that 35?
Of the 50, of the 50.
Of the 50, so we'll be
Yes.
up to 80 by the end of the year?
Yes, that's the goal.
That's good.
50 of the physical plant, but we still got, I mean, it seems like the getting in the customer conversions is.
Yeah,
Slow
so
down.
following up with what Matt's asking, those areas that we have fully fibered, especially the north area, when do we finally tell them it's time to get off because we're gonna decommission the cable side
Yeah.
and not support it?
Gonna boot you out.
Yes,
Right.
and yes, and that's exactly what we're working on. So we are meeting at least once a month that we try to identify the areas that have like 80% penetration, so that we go through that list and the CSRs are actively calling those customers. However, with the migration of the SELCO Stream project, I feel that we need to focus on the migration of people from the cable, the video side, off cable to SELCO Stream. But in the meantime, but at the same time, we're gonna try to also approach those customers and tell them, hey, there is fiber in your area. Can we just migrate you all at once? So that's kind of the strategy we're trying to put together.
We do expect 2024 to be the first time where we have nodes where there's no customers on the legacy plant. And that's why jumping down into the retirement chart here, you'll notice there's not a lot of retirements around overhead or underground or anything of customer facing, is because the plant's still in service. We're still actively using it, so we can't
For
start to
video,
retire it.
for the video side.
Now, just because I don't know much about this at all, streaming, is it a benefit to the customer to be using fiber for streaming versus the hard cable for streaming?
It works. I mean, it should be the same experience on if they are on cable or they are on fiber.
There's
Yeah,
no
that-
speed difference? Or
Yeah, there's no speed difference. Yes.
You're not gonna speed up the football games that we find out? Okay.
Cut out the ads.
Consistency though, like with weather, right?
Yep.
So, your traditional HFC plants are affected by rain, temperature changes, and fiber isn't, so.
And that's what we're anticipating, that he mentioned that some of these maintenance costs, as we migrate customers off the cable plan into the fiber, keep in mind, it is more expensive to maintain the older equipment running. So as we start decommissioning these areas, we're gonna start saving on
Right.
the operational side of things.
Why is that? The satellite?
Yeah, and the nature of the coaxial cable itself, right? It's light isn't susceptible to, the fluctuation in frequency changes with the, traditional cable and.
Metal.
Well, as
Metal
you know,
expansion,
it's cable, it's a
resistivity.
hard wire.
Yeah.
So the weather affects it. So we do see that interruption versus on fiber, that it's either a full outage or not.
So like the SELCO field technicians, right, they do, periodic plant maintenance where they're going out and they're readjusting, frequency levels, based on, weather changes and that type of thing. So that's something we constantly do throughout the year. And with fiber, you have to do that a lot less if at all, because it's just light. So it doesn't change.
That's good.
So just finishing up, we have some tower improvements we'll be looking at, and we're gonna be starting to plan for head-end redundancy. And, I believe we're looking at a potential of maybe a $5 million project over the course of a few years, but we're thinking at this point, it'll be, about $700,000 to spend this year, if we get to that right now. Taking a look, did I have any? I think that's everything we covered there. This area shows basically all the notes of where we believe the items are going to be used. And you can see based on the capital addition chart, where they are. On the retirement side, you'll see the main thing we're gonna be retiring is converters and modems, and that'll be coming from the conversion over to streaming. One of the things to note, in the next 2 years, there may be a more condensed retirement of the cable infrastructure as we come off the plant. One of the things that I just kind of learned is, you have this wire guiding, from pole to pole, you have it guiding the old signal, and it's wrapped. Well, when we put the new stuff in, because we're not removing the old one, we just wrap around it. So basically, even though we won't be pulling some of that wire down, we'll still be retiring it in the system because it'll no longer be used as we move nodes over to fiber. And then if there's any repair issues where something comes crashing down, we'll end up stripping that stuff off and scrapping it at that point. So you may not see salvage value with some of those retirements for the scrap because it may come in future years because the cost to undo, redo, put new, pole-to-pole stuff would be much more expensive.
I had one question about the head-end redundancy. If we're gonna be reducing cable, would the head-end have a satellite antennas and all that, or is it just a head-end more for all of the internet stuff?
Yes, exactly. It will be more internet-based, and the idea behind having a second head end is more for the reliability of things. I mean, when we started in 1983, TV was just a luxury.
Right.
Now, internet services is becoming a necessity. So it is the need of to always be online, to always have the system available. So the idea is to have a second head end where we could potentially, if we lose, in the case of a disaster or something, if we lose the only head end that we have today, we'll be able to retrofit or feed everyone else from the second head end.
Will we be able to reduce the satellite dish farm up there?
Correct. So the satellites will be going away, except for any signal that is local. So, for example, channel Nesson, New England Sport News. It's only a local channel that's considered a local channel versus your CNN, your ESPN. Those are nationwide channels. So the nationwide channels, we are receiving them directly from providers over fiber, IP, internet, versus the local channels like Channel 5, Channel Fox 25. Those are the local channels that we'll be receiving from our head-end antennas. So technically, we will only need it for NESN. The other one is the Boston Sport Channel from Comcast that we would need but probably will be just one satellite dish.
Okay, good.
And it'll be in a separate location. This way,
Right.
it's kind of disaster recovery.
Right.
So jumping down, you could see our plant costs will slowly increase over the next couple of years, but we'll also have some retirements in there in the next 2 to kind of bring it back down. And the one thing I did was I put all the additional spend for the fiber project onto this additional acquisitions page. And the reason for that is we don't know yet where that money will be spent, so which categories it should go into. This year, one of the exciting parts was we got to break out all the work orders now into much more detail. So now we have work orders by node. So as we're wrapping up a node, we can now close out that work order and we can capitalize as we go. It'll reduce the need for the amount of work I've been doing and I'll do in a couple weeks to go through and figure out, what is the current bucket that we have, and how does that go into the different assets. And we'll actually go through a project to utilize some of the cable designs that we have to break out those assets into a nice by type of strand of fiber and nodes and all that type of stuff, which will make future additions and retirements much more smooth, or much smoother. Now, jumping down to our cash flow statement, earlier when I said there's certain times where a negative cash flow is a positive thing, this is the example. Our current cash flow, we're looking at decreasing about 5.7 million. Now, apparently I don't have the chart in here. Two narratives. I'm going to show you the chart. Basically, the money we're looking to spend is a combination of bond money and depreciation fund money for the fiber project. So as everybody probably has heard before, you know, the fiber project was originally budgeted about $30 million, 15 million was bonded for, and the other 15 million was going to be taken out of depreciation fund, and we had ramped up depreciation fund for that. Meaning that when the bond kind of runs out toward the end of 2023-ish going into 2024, I think I've estimated it was about 2 million-ish left potentially next year in bond money that we'll probably spend almost the first couple months of 2024. We'll be going into depreciation fund money. So we expect the depreciation fund money to start withdrawing or drawing down from the total. So we do want to see the total available funds on the electric side dropping. I mean, cable side dropping over the course of the year, because that shows we're utilizing the spend for the fiber to the premises project. So, any questions?
That depreciation fund, is it gonna kind of target out about 17 million, or is it going down from?
It still should go down every year. At a certain point, we'd probably, I don't want to speak too soon, but I'd probably say that that'll be under 10 million. Yeah, one of the things that we're looking into with some of these studies and designs is I want to start getting metrics for what should the amount of depreciation fund be based on the current plant asset. So is that 10%? Is that 20%? And we want to start with everything targeting kind of what are these numbers, and that way we can report them here to say, hey, look, you know, we have what we want. We're a little bit under. We're a little bit over. Now, just one stipulation. Our depreciation fund on electric is required. On cable, there's no statute that requires it. So this is an earmarked account only. We have freer use, that means, of spending it. So if all of a sudden a major operating expense did come up and we needed to draw out of that, we could. On the electric side, we could not. Just for everybody to know.
Yeah.
So my quick summary for this one for Bob, it's a much rosier picture than the electric side. We are looking at, after a non-payment contribution of pilot to the town for the IT, about $3.8 million in net income. You know, our capital spend is primarily on our fiber to the premises project, and we're estimating about 8.9 million, I believe, of spend in 2024 for that project. And while we should see a decrease in our cash flow, it is a positive thing for us because that's showing we're spending the money that we planned on spending for the fiber project. And as long as we can procure all the items we need to, we should be able to close out the fiber project by 2025, and then it's just getting everybody migrated over.
Was there any other talk of anybody else coming into the area? No. That time, nothing else?
No, right now we're status quo as far as I know.
Matter of fact, one of the people is under thorough investigation by the federal government for use of funding that they were going to use to try to come into town that was totally illegal. But anyways, that's a separate issue.
Kidding, oh, I didn't hear that.
I don't know anything about that.
The AFC credit.
So anyways, well, that's great summary. Joel, you haven't said much. Anything you want to add to this? I know you're not under the penalty of the laser eyes of the general manager. Anything else you want to add to what's going on the cable side?
No, like Jim mentioned, we're gonna continue building fiber. That's where a lot of the expense or the investment is gonna be focused on. But at the same time, our goal is to migrate customers to SELCO Stream. We do have a target date of August 2024 when the legacy system that we put in place, believe the last revision was probably 1988, the existing system that we have. So it is at end of life. So the system, customers have to be migrated by August 2024, which is this year. We have a plan in place. I mentioned in the highlights that we have a working box because we have the budget. We wanted to do a demo, but we'll do a demo next month.
And we'll talk a little bit more on your update on that one, I think, just what's going on with that. So we'll stay on the budget then. Any other questions from the board on the, thank you very much, by the way, on the, nope, on the cable budget? If not, do we have a proposal to approve the 2024 cable budget?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
That was-
Good job, Jim.
Yeah,
That was easy to read,
yeah.
relatively speaking.
Nope. Yep, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, looks like the last item that we have is the general manager's highlights.
All right.
Over is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Trying to anticipate some of the themes that would potentially come up in this discussion, I added some legislative bits that might be of interest here. One being the allocation of ACP funds. Again, every time I see it, Val adding in the links is great, so if you're so inclined to click the link and read more, it's there. Just quickly scrolling through, because we've covered a lot today. One of the things earlier, we're still in January, earlier in the month, we did a presentation to the Shrewsbury Select Board just about the greatness of not only SELCO, but public power in general. So I thought it might be of interest as other communities start to see how good we have it. Attleboro's the latest in Massachusetts to investigate creating a municipal electric department, especially in this one. Didn't cite cost, but again, when you see a town line and one side's dark for a week and one side's dark for 10 minutes, people start to wonder what's going on, or never, not at all. So this one came from a recent storm, and that's a big driver for us and a point of pride for the business model.
Do you see any municipalities being able to buy the assets and convert? I mean, it just seems like such a daunting cost
Yeah.
nowadays.
Does anybody ever do it?
And as we've seen in Maine, I think in general, the challenge for just a bulk procurement is going to be always a lofty task. I have other creative solutions that perhaps might be a better, or I shouldn't say better, but easier path forward. But in terms of the way it's structured today, it's really tough. But I think as more communities like this say, hey, well, why can't we do this? You're going to start to have that pressure.
Because they tried to do it, I remember after the gong show up in Unitil
Yes.
a decade ago,
Exactly.
all those towns lined up, and then they started doing the math, and we're like, no thanks.
And it goes back to the way the law is currently written. Essentially, the incumbent utility can set the purchase price. So that's the caveat is they have full control over what that price would be. Okay, just on the transformer conversation, I added that in. We actively monitor this. One of the things that public power and all utilities are unified on is whatever rule changes or adjustments that need to be made to bolster the supply chain for this critical asset, we're all in support of. So just put that in there as
So what is it, like they're in a self-destruct mode for crying out loud? We have such a problem getting transformers, and now to make it even harder, put this big.
Kind of, that's the argument, is to further restrict it to these construction standards would further introduce these supply chain constraints, and now is not the time, is the
Yeah.
argument, like, even getting attention to the issue in general, to say, hey, perhaps we need to call attention to, supply chain support or whatever mechanism has been somewhat of a struggle.
Yeah, because about, wasn't it a year or two ago, didn't you folks meet with Representative McGovern's staff about this, and how concerned they were to make sure that they helped us, and so we got a response back from them,
For a month.
how they're enhancing us?
Just in general, broadly speaking, just through, advocacy efforts in Washington haven't necessarily resulted in any real changes to distribution transformer production.
Do we have any domestic production?
We do, actually. We previous to all of this, many of the transformers we purchased were domestic. There's a couple, what I would consider the more desirable companies are local to this country. But again, it's just, you can't get them anywhere. Even, GE outsourced a lot of their production to Mexico. Those ones, even before, had a much shorter lead time, but we can't get those. So we're even seeing the refurbished market timelines are stretched.
I wonder if with any of the, what the heck's my problem? The name of the bill. The way everybody was talking about superconductors and domestication of, any critical electrical infrastructure included in that?
That's been the context for the advocacy efforts, is saying, hey, include in these bills, even, now, like you use the Defense Production Act.
Yeah.
Yeah. Type of
Yeah.
model, just to get an influx. You take one good storm up Florida, you see
Oh, yeah.
a major reduction in national supply. So it's one thing we're monitoring. It goes back to locally with inventory levels and, coming from operations, I admit to being more partial to hoarding some of these things to make sure we have it. So that's just one of those things that we're closely monitoring, and we have a pipeline of orders waiting, and that goes back to, Jim's reports. So when those come in, we cross our fingers. Hopefully they come in a timely manner, and we just keep the orders rolling. I threw in transmission, not to go through each of these in too much detail. Transmission plan, because that tied to our line item discussion in the budget. So it's just something that is on the national scale, and FERC has a role in this, and we're continuing to do what we can to voice our portion of the story and get clarity on how these costs are being allocated, and some clarity on these rules, just because as we're closer than anyone are, as we talk about, we're directly connected to the public, and so we leverage that to say, hey, we have to talk to the people on the street about this. We need to know what's going on. Cold climate heat pumps, I'll skip over that a little bit, but that just goes back to some of our programming and keeping up with technology that makes some of our efforts a little more appealing.
So those are a lot more efficient now, these cold climate ones. I see them advertised.
Yeah.
Yep, they're getting a lot more efficient, and like this article is intended, just shows that the technology keeps
Yeah.
progressing.
Yeah, because if they can come up with that right now, in town, if you go for a heat pump or you're building a new house, most of the heat pumps will only go down to probably 5 to 10 degrees without a booster of some sort,
Right.
whether it's radiant electric or backup gas. And for those people in town who don't have gas, they're kind of out of the loop as far as that goes. So if they can come in and improve the efficiency down to minus 15 or something, that'd be pretty impressive. But I think that's a ways off. I may be wrong, but.
Nope, exactly. There it is. Option to also develop systems designed for 15 degrees below zero. So that's progressing.
Interesting timing that the DOE secretary was in New Hampshire the week before the primary.
Yeah, yeah.
Program.
Should have been in Maine.
Coincidence.
That's not added in here. Massachusetts National Gas Plant, so that goes back to some of our discussion with the Mystic RMR charges. So just further reading there to add some context to the costs affiliated with the retention of the Mystic Power Station and how that might relate to reliability of the region. And I thought this was interesting to also that transmission, our discussion about a base rate increase in general and just the uncertainty moving forward of electric rates for everybody. You can see here the DPU issuing a notice of investigation for energy affordability. So you talk about costs coming in for offshore wind, transmission, as we just highlighted in our own budgetary forecast, and many other factors that we probably haven't discussed today. Now, we're looking at energy affordability, and as someone who unfortunately lives in IOU territory, I can tell you there's not a whole lot more appetite for me to pay more than I already do.
I guess.
I have to really watch myself here, but
Mm-hmm.
the drivers of all of that cost are associated with no increased natural gas capacity, no, desire to want to accelerate the energy transition, which is wise, the need for more transmission to support that, the added costs of all of the programs, 25% of your bill. What more is there to investigate? I don't understand.
Yeah,
But
right.
And one editorial comment is just, if you look at our tariff sheet, you can see it's pretty, in my opinion, fairly easy to follow. If you go and try and find what goes into your residential rate for a National Grid or Eversource bill, it's like 10 pages long, and it has just, it's unbelievable. I couldn't even figure it out. So there's a lot going into these, at least speaking residentials, a lot going into those costs. All right, shifting to a more positive note, we had our Lutz Award presentation, forgetting all the things above on that page. This year we had 2 recipients that, again, we just have a great team, so it's hard to make that selection. We had Michael Lawler, help desk supervisor, who, again, with all of our fiber and stream efforts, has really stepped up to the plate to help answer everyone's, not only participate internally, but answer all the public's questions when they call in and have technical issues. And so that was a well-deserved award. And then
Da-da-da-da.
here's Val, and I don't know what else to say, aside from the fact that she's outstanding every day. So that was also
Congratulations.
well-deserved.
Yeah, and greatly appreciated by, both of those individuals, greatly appreciated by our board as far as what was going on there. To the point where we've never had a dual award.
Yeah, right.
This time around, we decided that, both of them were very deserving. That's great.
Yep.
And,
So-
and I think, is Michael the tallest person in, or are you?
He's got me beat.
Ah,
Yeah, I've already
head and
bought,
shoulders, yeah.
I got the stretching machine already from Amazon. We're working on it.
I hadn't personally, I've talked with him on the phone, but never met the guy. Man, I'm looking at his belt buckle.
Yeah. Yep. So, there might be a 1v1. He does play in a recreational basketball league, so we'll have to settle this on the court.
Oh,
Out
boy.
by the Chargers. Good.
Yeah, so that was great. And then some of these, I guess, in the interest of time, we had a lot of further outreach. One of the things I just wanted to call attention to is the fact that we don't, sometimes we like to be right and other times we don't. In this case, our prediction for the Affordable Connectivity Plan, the ACP program funds from the federal government to make internet more affordable are running out. We opted to not participate in that plan with the expectation that was going to happen. Instead, as we talked about with our, lose track, 1 or 2 meetings ago, we implemented our own affordability plan, which again is incorporated with our rates and in the budget we just presented. And so that way it's a durable program
Right.
for folks in perpetuity, in theory. So that was just an interesting thing. So now they're figuring out how to unravel that. All of these larger companies, the private sector, who all participated now has to figure out how to either come up with their own funding, which perhaps is unlikely, or notify all of their income qualified customers that this is going away and somehow they have to pay for it. Let's see. What's a couple? Customer satisfaction survey's been launched through Public Power Data Source and Great Blue. So again, we continue to monitor these metrics to inform our decision-making. I just thought I'd mention that. We're working on the outage management system. Again, I guess as it pertains to the budget, I should mention some of these where our rebate programs and our demand-side management programs tend to be quite popular. I think we've seen a lot of success there. We're leading in a lot of the figures that we track through MWIC. So there's a good story there. Some of the information we included in the bullet points to support that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And
No,
then-
and I think the Next Zero program that we participate in has been very good as far as, at least we're not on the local TV being like, Mass Save being snot knocked out of them for not getting rebates out. That the
right, yeah.
Next Save programs, Next Zero is making it all happen, so that's good.
Yep, and we're proud, Becca, our Director of Integrated Resources, is chairing the Next Zero Oversight Group for MWIC, so that, I think that's a recognition of our leadership in that capacity, so we're
Great.
closely involved with that. Electrical engineering and ops, that supports, we talked a lot about looking forward. This is more of current events of what we've been working on over the last month. Again, keeping up with development and, trying to chip away at our internal projects, the voltage upgrades, as
Right.
you mentioned earlier, things like that. And then just covering SELCO Stream, since that's fresh on the mind. SELCO Stream, we have the box. So right now, I think it's an interesting statistic. 20% now of our TV customers are on stream, or I should say 19.3 in my mind, already rounded. Perhaps it is as of today, but as of the end of 2023, 19.3% are on stream as we continue to push on towards our August deadline with our DigiCipher technology going end of life. So we're really trying to make that push to get as many customers converted as possible. And to facilitate that is that second bullet point, the SELCO Stream box. That's been an adventure to trying to find the right fit there. We believe we've settled on the ideal product with the EV Pros. And so we have, again, those are very much intertwined in the supply chain issue as well, less so than the other option we're looking at. So we have several, just shy of 500 in stock, with a couple thousand on order, actually. And so we can start deploying those boxes as
That
the
looks like a nice, simple box to use.
simple.
My brother can handle that.
The remote mirrors what folks are used to. You have the shortcut buttons that we can have pre-programmed to stream. So I think it's a good transition for usability. And then I guess that's it, just the report in more detail, if you'd like more detail where we're at with the nodes and the conversion progress with respect to customers, and our typical data points for IT tickets, if you have any questions.
Two things. One, you have a note in there about the SELCO scholarship. We do have the option for 3 $1,000 scholarships. I think Val's got the application up and running. It's for any Shrewsbury resident who's a senior in any high school. Doesn't have to be Shrewsbury High, doesn't have to be just St. John's. It's area-wide. If they're a senior, they're eligible and they should apply. And the cutoff date's the first or second week in March, I think. But
March
the-
11th.
March 11th. Make sure you get that application in. So there's 3 $1,000 scholarships. Okay, and then the other thing was that box that we were just talking about, is that what's gonna go into the large facilities that we have, like, Southgate and, some of the Orchard, it's not Orchard Meadow, but Orchard, whatever.
Yeah.
These-
Yes, I've been in contact with Southgate. We're installing one at their car room. I think
Okay.
it's called, next week.
Okay, so we'll help them, doing that now. Will this also be like for Francis Gardens and,
Correct. They will be available to all our subscribers.
okay, but this is gonna be what will replace,
Yes.
Yeah.
okay. On these larger facilities, basically. Okay, so they don't have to rewire the whole place for fiber or whatever. Okay. And then we did have didn't we have some sort of Blue Circle of Death outage?
Oh,
Yes, yeah, I mentioned it to Chris. We had an outage last Thursday. It started at 11 a.m. It was one of the servers was acting up. Customers were actually reporting they couldn't play VOD, they couldn't play the recordings. So we were in communications with our supplier or Minerva. That's the ones that makes the product, and they were scheduling a patch, but there was a system outage, and they have to apply the patch in the middle of the day, and that's when the outage actually happened. After the patch was applied, VOD is playing, recordings are playing, so the system seems to be stable at the moment.
Okay, so it wasn't a self-inflicted wound, it was through Minerva that.
Yes.
The supplier that had the issue.
Yep,
But
yep.
they were able to work along and get.
Yeah, they were waiting for a maintenance window to actually fix the
Yep.
server, but the server, I mean, this is the nature of software and programming. I mean, it just died and something crashed and they have to apply the patch in the middle of the day.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Or how about board members, any other comments? If not, our February meeting,
Yeah, it's
I'm gonna check with Val, because I wanna find out exactly where what date and
27.
where we're gonna meet.
Police station training room.
Okay, training room, okay. And that's on what date? The 23rd, you said?
27.
The 27th.
27th, it's, 0800, and it's the police training room. Okay, and we'll still be able to broadcast from there?
Correct, yep.
Okay. With that said,
So moved.
so do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved, okay. And second? Okay,
Second.
okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much.